server is as much fun to throw as it is to use. Master potter Bill Van Gilder will make this practical piece in 2 sizes and attach 2 different kinds of handles right now on DIY's Throwing Clay. Designing functional kitchenware that's aesthetically pleasing is one of Bill Van Gilder's favorite pastimes. He's been throwing clay for more than 30 years.
This double bowl project is a great example of how to take a simple bowl shape, combine it with a second bowl, and turn it into a great, rather sophisticated serving piece. I'm going to show you the technique I use to attach these 2 bowls when they're wet, right at the wheel. I'm then going to show you how to make a reed handle and a bamboo handle to finish the pieces. The first thing we've got to do is get our clay ready.
To make the double bowl server, you'll need 3 clay balls, 2 of equal weight and a 1-pound lump, an undercutting rib, a wire knife, a pointer, a cutoff wire, a foam pad, a piece of 1-inch diameter dowel, texture boards, a bamboo handle, and basket reed.
You can make your double bowl server any size you like, as long as the weights of the 2 bowls are the same. First thing I'm going to do is make these 2 smaller bowls. It's a bit of practice for making the larger bowls later.
Bill starts by centering the first 12-ounce lump of clay on the wheel.
Now I'm using lots of water for this part of the project. I don't want my fingers to drag and pull the bowl off center. Before I put the final curves into the bowl, I'm going to trim it right now. When I attach these 2 bowls together, later on, typically, I would trim them. I can't do that in this case. I've got 2 bowls stuck together. There's no way to center it on the wheel. So I do the trimming here, at this stage, just before I shape it.
Trimming the base of a pot at the wet stage can work well for other projects, too. Bill's put tips on when to use this great technique on DIYnetwork.com.
I'm going to use my wooden undercutting knife, skim down the side of the bowl, and create a nice tight corner at the foot. Now I can put the shape into the bowl.
With his inside fingertips, Bill pushes the clay against the long side of the tool to give the bowl its shape.
There's my first bowl. I'm going to remove the water from the inside, smooth the rim with the tip of my sponge. One last thing I always do to my pots is I use my fingertip. I put a little swirl in the center. Start about 1 inch out of center and wipe your finger to center and across it. Now I've got to make another bowl exactly like this one. To do that, to get the same dimensions, I'm going to use a pointer. But cut the pot loose from the wheel, and with dry fingertips, set the bowl aside. Now, because I'm using the same weight of clay as the first bowl, and I'm using a pointer for the measurement, these 2 bowls will be identical.
Bill throws the second bowl exactly the same way he did the first one.
Now I'm going to lift this bowl and tuck it up against the first bowl. Before I do that, I'm going to wet the side of this bowl. That makes it really sticky. Dry fingertips, lift the bowl at the bottom, line up the rims, and press it. It's a very light touch at this point. I don't want to distort the bowls at the foot. So my fingertips are barely holding on to the bowl. And now this has to be done fairly firmly. And you know, it's best done up in front of you. Notice that I'm using wet fingertips. I want my fingertips to slide easily over these clay surfaces. It's just a gentle squeeze. I'll make sure it's straight. The last thing I do is look down on the pot and make sure that the curves of each bowl are about the same. That looks pretty good.
When DIY's Throwing Clay continues, Bill thumbs the bowls and corrugates a couple of coils. Welcome back to Throwing Clay. Bill is making double bowl servers. So far, he's thrown 2 small bowls. With an undercutting tool, he trimmed the bowls on the wheel head when they were wet. Then he tucked the bowls together on a wear board. With wet fingers and a gentle squeeze, he joined the walls of the bowls to form a double bowl server. Using the same techniques, Bill makes another server, this one a bit bigger. He throws each bowl from 1 pound 4-ounce lumps of clay. Now he's ready to combine the two bowls into a second server.
I don't want too much water on it. I don't want the water to run down and touch the foot. That sticks everything tightly to the wearboard. So just enough to make it tacky. Set it in place. Now, what am I watching here? I'm watching this rim. I want them to move together very, very level and evenly. I'm going to push them together and then squeeze them with my fingertips and seal one wall against the other. So light pressure, not too hard. I don't want to dent the walls of the pots. I'm using the broad pat of my thumb and my finger. I'm starting the squeeze at the top and I'm slowly moving down. And again, I have to make sure that these two shapes from the top view are identical. That looks pretty good. One final wipe with a sponge. Okay, next step is to let these dry until they're a soft leather hard. We'll then finish the foot and add a pair of handles on each set of bowls. Now, these are pretty stiff, but they're still soft enough that I can manipulate the clay a little bit. I'm going to set them on this foam pad. That protects the rim from being damaged. I'm going to use my thumb, just lightly soften that sharp edge. Now this thumbing technique is a really useful skill to have. You'll use it often on other pots you make. Now I'm just going to pass over each foot surface with a damp sponge. It takes away all my fingerprints. And while this is upside down, this is the ideal time to put my signature stamp on the piece. Okay, let's make some short handles. Now here's a little tip about working with coils. Once we've rolled them out, they become pretty dry. And we're going to bend these and they'll tend to crack. So often I dampen this surface. That keeps the clay moist and really easy to bend and very pliable. I'm going to put a little bit of corrugated texture on this coil. I've got these corrugated boards. I'm going to lightly roll over the coil at a slight angle, and I get this sort of twisted surface to the coil.
With a wire knife, Bill cuts the coil to length. As he increases or decreases the scale of a project, the size of the attachments change accordingly.
These thick coils are for the big bowl. I'm going to thin the coil out, make a thinner coil, smaller scaled, for the smaller bowl set.
Bill textures the smaller coil and cuts it to length.
You know, I handle these coils pretty carefully at this point. Any dents from my finger will show up later. Okay, let's get them onto the bowls. I'm going to start with the smallest one. And I'm going to wet the surface here and here. Likewise on the other side. Bend it and tuck it up right underneath the rim. Now I don't secure it yet. I want to make sure that they have the same height and the same width. That looks pretty good. I'm going to take this round piece of dowel and press each end of the coil tightly to the bowl rim. Then I'm going to stand the handles up just a little bit. Okay, let's put the handles on the larger bowls. I follow the same pattern. And again, I'm going to check for level. This one's a little shorter, so I'm going to pull it up just a little bit, stretch that clay. And now let's attach them securely.
Coming up on DIY's Throwing Clay, Bill selects glaze colors that complement the server's super shape. Welcome back to Throwing Clay. Master potter Bill Van Gilder is making 2 double bowl servers of different sizes. He started by throwing straight-sided bowls on the wheel. He threw each bowl exactly the same way. He also made sure to use the same weight of clay for the pair of bowls he combined so they would be identical. He joined the bowls to make servers and set them aside until they were soft leather hard. Then he thumbed the bottoms smooth and added corrugated clay handles to the sides of the servers.
Okay, the next step is to let our double bowls dry until they're bone dry. Then we can get them into the kiln for their first firing. I'm going to do that drying slowly. I'm going to put a piece of plastic over the top of these bowls and dry them over a couple of days. I want them to dry evenly. These thin walls will dry quickly. These double walls will dry slowly. I want to even that out. I don't want them to crack apart.
Bill loads the double bowls into the kiln for the bisque firing. The kiln fires for 10 to 12 hours. It cools for at least 24 hours before Bill can unload the servers. Now he's ready to glaze.
You know, sometimes it's great to use two very strongly contrasting glaze colors on the same piece. In this case, I'm using a virtual black and a white. The sharpness of the two glazes against each other really accents these oval shapes of the bowls.
Before Bill glazes, he applies a circle of wax-resist emulsion to the foot of each bowl.
Okay, let's get the first bowl glazed. I'm going to hold at the side of each handle and in the center, but on the waxed area.
With a dab of glaze, Bill touches up the blank spots where his fingers held the handles.
And the second bowl, same thing. Now you can see where the glaze is still stuck to the wax a little bit. That's what I'm going to wipe away. I'm looking for a nice straight edge around the foot of each pot. I'm going to switch glazes and put the second dip on. Now I don't want this cream rust inside the pot. I want that black glaze showing in there. So I'm going to dip this piece as level as I can down into the glaze. And I'm going to stop about ½ inch short of the foot. That'll create that black line, which visually ties the outside to the inside. Now I take my time here. If I turn this over quickly, this liquid glaze is going to run down the inside. So I wait till it sets up a little bit.
Bill dips the smaller double bowl server the same way.
So one more thing to do. Where my fingers held on to each handle, I've left a bare spot. There's no white glaze there. So I'm just going to touch that up with a soft brush. As soon as the bowls are dry, we'll get them into the kiln for their high temperature firing.
For the glaze firing, the kiln will heat up to 2200 degrees Fahrenheit for 10 to 12 hours. Then the kiln must cool for at least 24 hours before Bill can unload the double bowl servers. Next on DIY's Throwing Clay, Bill weaves a handle with basket reed, and we visit two potters who create cool shapes with darts.
No job is too big or too...
Welcome back to Throwing Clay. Husband and wife Neil Patterson and Sandy Pierantozzi live and work in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Over the years they've been working with clay, each has developed their own style. Neil creates primarily on the potter's wheel, and Sandy's focus is on hand building. Together they've discovered the joy of a unique kind of clay work they call parts and darts.
A dart is a sewing term, really, and it basically it means a wedge of clay. And I'm going to cut darts out of this cylinder, what I call leaf darts. I always draw them first before I cut them. It's a way of altering the form off the round, and gives you a lot more possibilities in what you can create with form. You can get really elaborate forms with darts, but I would start simple. Now this thrown cylinder that I'm darting is dry enough off the wheel that I can touch it without leaving fingerprints, but it's not freshly thrown. It's also not leather hard yet, so you don't want to let it get too stiff. So what I'll do is I'll pinch that together to see how it's changing the profile, and if I like that, the direction that it's going. If I want to get even more extreme, I can then cut that dart bigger. And that, you can see that gives like a little pinch, kind of a waist to the form. There's something that becomes very anthropomorphic too when you do two darts like that.
Unlike Neil, who threw his cylinder on the wheel, Sandy hand-built a cylinder. Now she's ready to cut some darts.
I've made cylinders without texture because it's easier to learn this without texture. And I use a marker often to just divide up the cylinder, and I'm just dividing it in half right now with a marker. And then I'll measure my darts and draw them on there. So because I want these ultimately to line up, I have the darts be measured. I make little templates of the darts. And for me, it's a way to explore form, not on the wheel. You're still taking it out of the round. So I'm just cutting out the dart, and my knife is angled so that the dart folds over itself. So you can see one is, and they just fold over. And I like the clay to be very soft for this, because then I can really manipulate it.
Sandy moistens the edges she'll press together for a nice tight seam.
And I like that you can use a really large cylinder and cut multiple darts in it. It's a great way to investigate form. You can really explore different cuts. I call this just a straight V dart because it's a straight cut.
Neil cuts similar V darts in a round vase to alter its shape. Like Sandy, he bevels the cut so the seam seals smoothly. But he uses a fettling knife to bisect the rim and outline the darts before cutting them.
So you can see there where I've cut at a beveled angle so that when these overlap, the top side can actually lay on top of the underside. And I find that bevel is important for these to hold together. Now this really alters the form quite a bit. But if I wanted to close in even more, I can go back and cut those darts bigger. But I really like what that does to the form, giving it shoulders that way. And reach inside and compress. I usually leave the seam as long as it's neat. I don't mind seeing that.
One of the things to consider is whether the work is going to be functional or sculptural, because if it's functional, you have to consider function. I make functional pots, so I have to be careful that anything I dart will still be functional. And if you're not working within the functional realm, then you can go crazy.
Whether you alter the form by cutting away clay and reshaping pots like Sandy and Neil, or combine pots to make a completely new form like Bill did with this double bowl server, experimenting with new shapes is a wonderful way to expand your techniques and talent as a potter.
Finishing this project is pretty easy. I'm going to attach a bamboo handle to the small double bowl server. You can find these bamboo and cane handles at your local clay supplier.
There are a variety of materials you can use to make handles for clayware. Bill's put his favorites on DIYnetwork.com.
Now the handle of this larger double bowl, I'm going to make out of this basket reed. This is circular basket reed, and you can find it at your hobby shop. I've soaked the reed for about 24 hours. Now here's an aesthetic consideration. I've got a circle here and a circle here. I'm going to make a third circle, and I want all three of those circles to be about equal. All right, now let's weave this back and forth. Draw this backward, return it to the handle on this side. Draw this one over the top and weave it through this clay handle. I'm going to have to tie up both ends. And to do that, it's kind of ungainly because this is springy stuff. So I'm going to use a pair of twisty ties, tighten them up so I can finish my weaving. Let's cut away the excess reed. Now I want to finish each end. So I found this flat basket reed. It's what they use for caning chairs. I'm going to start down low on the big reed with this flat reed. I'm going to twist about 5 or 6 times. Now because this reed has soaked for some length of time, as it dries it's going to shrink and tighten up. That's what holds this whole handle together. And like tying a shoe, I'm going to pull the end back through.
Bill ties off the other side of the handle the same way. Then he removes the twisty ties.
You know what I like about this project? Both these handle materials are natural product. This reed and this bamboo, just like the clay. They're really complementary to each other. You'll probably want to wash your double bowls by hand rather than the dishwasher. These reed handles, unlike the clay, they won't last forever. I'm Potter Bill Van Gilder. Have fun in the studio.